Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show as we want to hear this from Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston, Texas.
I'm very, very proud of the people in this city, citizens, good Samaritans, neighbors, the business community, the nonprofits. I'm very, very proud of how we could come together. No one is asking whether you're a Democrat or Republican. No one is asking whether you're here legally or not legally. No one is asking about your partisan or your social economic status. If you are in need in this city, we band together, work together to give you the assistance you need to get back on your feet. And that's exactly what's happening right here. The volunteers are simply incredible. And as the mayor of the city of Houston, I could not be more proud.
As we continue our coverage of the aftermath of Hurricane and then Tropical Storm Harvey, which has, of course, struck the east coast of Texas, the Galveston and Houston area, and continues to send rain pouring down on the area, an area, of course, where the watershed is already absolutely saturated. There's no place for the water to go but to flood in most cases. We'll be talking in this portion of the program with Veronica Sites, a crisis responder and conflict resolution speaker, a mental health expert who joins us this evening. Her website, conflictresolutionspeaker.com, conflictresolutionspeaker.com. Took me a moment to decipher that, Veronica, but thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell us about the crises that develop just in terms of people coping in a circumstance like this.
Well, one of the things when you have a fluid situation like you do right now, just not only displaced, but, maybe move to one place and then having to move to another shelter. And some of the people, at very last minute are having to make a choice to leave the area altogether, for example, being sheltered in, Dallas, Fort Worth, outlying community, metropolitan areas away from home. It really disarms a lot of the coping mechanisms to an extent. And, anytime anybody's away from home, even under the best circumstances, the first few nights away are kind of hard to sleep. So, in the shelters, they maintain a very good protocol for, lights out and resting environments. However, you're talking about hundreds and thousands of people in one shelter. So the rest is not the best, which fatigues the emotions and the coping abilities for the very stressful things that they are facing, as well as not knowing what their home condition exists, if it was even standing when it was, standing out of water. But the unknown escalates and elevates the stress level. So there's a lot of work for every volunteer and, professional that's standing up and taking the call.
Yeah. Of course, one thing about such tragedies as this is that the very circumstances of the disaster make it difficult to reach even the often inadequate resources available to help people who have been stressed like this. Even if there were enough mental health professionals in any given area at any given time, getting to one under circumstances such as this is virtually impossible in some cases. I'm wondering, are there efforts made at the same time that the authorities are trying to find shelter and warmth, a dry place, food, and all the other essentials that are necessary? Are there efforts to provide some kind of mental health experts to be available at, for example, shelters?
Yes, there are many levels of helping and assist. One level would be, stress management individuals that, are licensed, credentialed, or certified for critical stress management. Then there are licensed therapists and providers there for, the more escalated or more difficult needs that one is not prepared to handle. But also you've got a lot of people that, may or may not have prior to the event been, at stages of, and it's not just mental health, but these types of events result in people being without medications of any kind. I'm not just in the space of mental health, but they've left everything behind, and they may or may not have those facilities, those medications available. So facilities do provide, and we make every provision for, community emergency response teams, they meet well in advance of emergency response so that the brainstorming, the planning, and the preparedness has been gone through to hopefully cover every stone that would be, turned in a situation. But even out of tragedy, we always learn from the prior response and improve on those things. So as tragic as this situation is, there are many, many, many places that have already got the needs ready to be met when these people come to the shelter that have only improved upon from, previous natural disasters.
1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. We're looking at the aftermath of Hurricane and Tropical Storm Harvey with the Veronica Sites in this portion of the program, a crisis responder and a mental health expert. Her website, conflictresolutionspeaker.com. Here's a call from David in San Francisco. Hello, David.
Yeah, how are you, Jim, and your guest? I was reading about the worst hurricane in the history of America a couple of years ago, and apparently it was in the same area in the year 1900. The biggest amount of deaths from a single hurricane.
Oh, the great hurricane of Galveston, Texas, yeah.
Right, and if I understand right, the original city of Galveston was built in a kind of a bowl shape around a bay, and when that storm started, everything just slid down and went straight to the bay, and incredible loss. At the time, I guess they had telephones, but, the idea of paved roads in a serious way and all sorts of other, what we consider conveniences were just not there, and massive losses. So you got to really feel for the people in the area. But one of the things out here in San Francisco, I work on energy issues, and we keep track of nuclear power plants. And if I understand right, the only nuclear power plant they've got down there is in that same bowl. I may be wrong, but it looks to be that same area. And as of just a couple of days ago, that plant was running at 100%. They didn't shut it down, according to Atomic Energy Commission. I'll think of the name of it. They're supposed to shut down.
Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Yeah, NRC, right. Yeah, they're supposed to reduce power or shut them down, in the case of a hurricane. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it. And one of the real advantages to Texas, a lot of people don't realize it, but Texas is the single state that has the most wind power in the country. And and most of that wind power is along the Gulf there. And so they should be just fine with the amount of wind that they've got to keep everything going. Mm-hmm. One of the things about this storm is it's not super fast winds. It's really only about 40 miles an hour, but it's just hovering there and just dropping the tonnage of rain.
Yeah.
And so wind is just fine in a situation like that, but wind power is just fine in a situation like that. So, I really feel for those people, but the management of that nuclear power plant is one of the big dangers.
Well, we'll certainly we'll certainly keep our eye on that. Thank you for your call. I was not aware of that particular circumstance. I know Veronica, looking back on the hurricane to which he referred, that was September 8th of 1900, so almost exactly 117 years ago. That hurricane struck Galveston. The storm surge crested at 15 feet. Mind you, the high points in the city at that time were between 7 and 9 feet above sea level, and just the storm surge crested at least 6 feet above total inundation of any part of the city. 30,000 people were left homeless. Death toll, they don't really know, but it's generally accepted as between 6 and 12,000. The generally accepted figure, 8,000 deaths, but no one is entirely sure. Katrina, of course, 1,836 people died in 2005. We now have a death toll known as 9 in this particular case. In fact, a grim sidelight to this, there were so many bodies to bury in 1900 in Galveston that the corpses were weighted, shipped out into the Gulf of Mexico on barges, and dumped overboard. So I guess if there's anything that we can draw sustenance from, it is that things could always be worse, Veronica.
Well, that is true. I mean, there's so much that we overlook, and again, the death toll for now is very low, and but that is indicative of how we learn to respond to warnings and not take for granted that you can sit this one out while there's still people that are there. That is one of the aftermath situations right now, that people are really aware of the rising waters, even the dams that are releasing water to those neighborhoods. They're making different decisions. I mean, everybody learns from the past, and hopefully those same mistakes or those same tragedies are not repeated. And I think we're seeing that in the low number mortality, which is phenomenal considering how much flooding there is continuing.
Absolutely. We'll come back and we'll talk some more and take your calls as well. Our guest, Veronica Sites, a crisis responder, mental health expert. Her website, conflictresolutionspeaker.com. And we're looking at all aspects of Harvey in eastern Texas. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. We're looking at the aftermath of Hurricane and Tropical Storm Harvey with Veronica Sites, a mental health expert. And Paul calls in from Portland, Maine tonight to discuss this disaster. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Go right ahead.
Oh, goody. One of the things that I think people should think about before there's a disaster is they should think about where they're going to get electric energy for lights, the radio, the electric grill they might want, cooking food. And so I have a complete power supply with just one solar panel that I keep for emergencies. And so with one solar panel, you can actually do a lot. And today, I don't know if you've heard this on the news or not, but today is one of the most important days in world history, because today they announced that global solar capacity just exceeded atomic energy capacity. In other words, there's now more solar energy being produced by solar panels in the world than there is all the atomic energy plants in the world.
Well, that certainly is an interesting fact. We appreciate you pointing that out, Paul. Thank you very much. Obviously, having access to adequate power is important. Of course, in an area that is covered with storm clouds, maybe the immediate answer is not necessarily solar, but certainly it is important in many parts of the country and in many circumstances for people to have emergency generators. And Veronica Sites, I would think that as your role as a crisis responder, you would note any number of instances in which people may be facing a crisis which is at least partially of their own doing, or more particularly what they did not do.
Oftentimes there is that predicament. And, of course, there's always a hindsight. I should have done this, or I could have done that. And oftentimes people are surviving by nature. And they're instinctively they go to places where, higher ground inside of an attic, not thinking that, if the waters rise there, then you're trapped unless you have a method to, if you have an axe. But not everybody has an axe. But how, think through, okay, how do I get out of this situation if I make that particular choice? And one of the things that we encounter often after a situation like this is the rescue efforts in themselves. If somebody's rescued off of the roof, and I saw this over and over with a previous hurricane, and it's yet to be determined at this time, but we saw a lot of roof rescues previously. We're not seeing that many. We're seeing a lot of on ground in boat type of rescues, but especially for the nonverbal younger children, oftentimes the impact of that, because they have no words, just the simple movements of a sudden sound of a motor coming up can embed a emotional response. So it triggers things that might be out of the normal behavior for them. So we do work with parents to help them understand, what would be a normal comforting motion might be disruptive for now if the rescue was of this nature. And oftentimes mental health professionals can detect, if they're observing certain behavior at a certain time, then we can ask the questions because,
right.
Parents are just doing the best to comfort their kids.
In many cases. More to come, more calls in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. We are talking with mental health expert and crisis responder Veronica Sites about some of the after effects of the hurricane and tropical storm called Harvey. This is Kelly calling in from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, not that far away. What have you received there, Kelly?
So far, it's just a lot of rain, and that's what's making us nervous, and that's why I was so thankful for y'all to take my call tonight. I really appreciate y'all having this topic on because I don't think that people realize how much it alters your life long term. We lost our house in the flood last year. We've been back in our home a total of 2 weeks, and we're still not fully in it. We're just able to live in it. We've been living in a travel trailer for a year, and we've been back in for 2 weeks. We have bedrooms, we have a kitchen, and we have some tile. The rest of it is still, sheetrock and empty walls and things like that. And, seeing this storm out there and knowing that there's a possibility that it can come to Louisiana or that, we're going to be getting rain all day, I've not been able to focus on my job. I've been worried about my children. I know that my kids are worried because they went through this last year. And so now every time it rains, every time you get a flood, there's an anxiousness, there's a vulnerability that you never thought you could feel. And I think that touching on this topic, people need to understand you don't have to have a mental disability or some kind of illness or anything, and it's going to affect you long term. And having a support system and being able to talk about it is very important for both children and adults.
Absolutely. What would you say to Kelly?
Kelly is a wise woman because everyone needs to decompress. And one of the things that I am just very hopeful our society will begin to learn to appreciate that there ought to never be a stigma when there is critical stress following traumatic events because it's humanly normal to have stressful, escalation when you've been introduced to situations that are life-threatening, that destroy and take everything. And, if our children could learn as the adults start to learn that, it is okay under these circumstances, that these are the things we're feeling. We're not crazy, number one. Number two, now, and I want to say this to Kelly, one of the things that can be done at this time is one, recognize and be honest with the children that, yes, we did go through that storm, but at this time, in this situation, in this house, this is how we will handle it if it ever comes to that. Because, again, it's that learning from the past and having a plan that reassures the children, but it also allows a parent empowerment to kind of think through, okay, this is my opportunity. What would I do different? Because you have an opportunity to plan and, if need be, evacuate sooner or do whatever you need to do. But we do learn from the past, and it is long-term, and it is not uncommon for it to be long-term effects because it does alter a sense of security, both for adults and adolescents.
Well, I hope that was helpful to you, Kelly.
So much, and like I said, I appreciate y'all bringing light to this because it is very important, and it's just something that you know.
Yes, we may have lost Kelly, but in any event, we certainly get the gist of that. And I would like you to, if you would, stay on the line, Veronica Sites, and we'll speak with you briefly off air. But again, Veronica Sites is a crisis responder and mental health expert. Her website, conflictresolutionspeaker.com. That's conflictresolutionspeaker.com. And certainly in events such as this, it is important that you do have a support system and the like. She has won a unique recognition by Female Leadership and Victim Relief Ministry after the tragic events of Hurricane Katrina. So she knows whereof she speaks.